It looks like, okay, this was,
It says live on my side.
It says live on your side?
Well, in your window, it says live.
Okay, we're having some technical difficulties here because it looks live,
but it's not live.
but I'm not sure if it's live. Let's see here. Come on. Okay. Yes, we're live. All right. Welcome to I Love Being Sober. My name is Tim Westbrook. I am your host, and I love being sober. I love my life today. And my dream with this podcast or with this show is to carry the message, to share the message, and help other people get to a place where they love being sober as well. And today I'm here with Rick Baney. And Rick Baney is a good friend of mine. I've known Rick for quite some time. He works in the industry. He is in long-term recovery. He is an amazing example of somebody who works a solid program and does ethical work and works in the industry. And I've always looked up to him. So Rick Baney is the Chief Operating Officer of 𝐾 and Associates. He brings a passion for helping anyone affected by addiction and co-occurring disorders, both personally and professionally. Rick's background includes over 36 years living and supporting the philosophy of treatment for successful recovery. Rick brings extensive knowledge and experience with finding treatment provider resources and by supporting an individual's continued recovery through ongoing case management and coaching. Also, working with families to help promote their own healing and understanding of themselves and their loved ones. Rick has worked with several highly respected treatment programs throughout his extensive career and is dedicated to connecting individuals, families, and professionals with the most appropriate treatment resources and providing ongoing support and monitoring. Rick, welcome to the show. I'm super grateful to have you here, and just looking forward to spending the next hour with you.
Thanks, Tim. It's an honor to have been asked to be a part of your podcast. This is a great opportunity to collaborate in a greater platform, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so we just got a comment from Leonard Green. We are live. So we are live. Anybody out there, give us a like, give us a thumbs up. If you know Rick Baney, if you love Rick Baney, give us a like, say hello, give us a comment. Let Rick know that you're there. Let me know that you're there. If you have any questions for Rick, post them in the feed because we are live. So let's talk. I mean, today we're going to talk about the value and importance of case management for long-term recovery success, which, and obviously we're going to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic and how case management plays a huge role in the potential for a person achieving long-term recovery success, the importance of family support and coaching within the case management process, which, as we all know, it's not just the addict, it's not just the alcoholic, it's the family, it's the entire family system. So our experience is that the entire family system needs support and coaching, or it's going to be a huge way to help that person and that family get through these tough times, both in the addict's life and during the pandemic, obviously. And that's kind of it. You're super passionate, Rick, about the work you do. And first, I want to let's hear from you. I want to hear from you. Where did your journey start? What led you to recovery? What was your life? What was your life like before? Why did you get into recovery? Let's hear it.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I enjoy sharing my story because it is so familiar to many out there. I mean, it's not necessarily unique. Gosh, where do I start? I lived a pretty normal lifestyle growing up. I had good parents. I had a great family supporting me. I got involved in alcohol and then drugs, and life spiraled pretty significantly until I was mid-20s, and then I hit the wall. At the age of 26, I entered treatment through well, I guess you would have called it an intervention. It's interventions are seen a little differently today than they were back then.
Right.
They just kind of, surprised me, and I agreed to go to treatment. I knew I was an alcoholic and a drug addict. I knew I had a problem. So anyway, that was
who did the intervention?
a nurse practitioner in recovery. And again, like I said, this is 36 plus years ago. So it was a different style of who did interventions. There were very few interventionists back in those, at least what we think of as an interventionist today. So anyway, that was that happened on December 17th, 1983. I went into treatment, the traditional 28 days, where I stayed 33 days. And I've been clean and sober ever since.
Was that your first? Was that your first time trying to get sober?
That was my first time.
Wow.
I mean, so I'm here to tell everybody that, although relapse, might be a part of the recovery process for an individual and or a family, it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Right.
And we'll get into a little bit more as to, that aspect of it and how I ended up doing what I'm doing today. But, I got sober. I was clean and sober for, about 6 years before I took a leap and changed career directions and stepped into working in the treatment industry. I started out with a program 30 years ago that that was very comprehensive. They had all levels of care. They had residential treatment. They had a high-end private RTC. They had primary mental health, acute psych, for adults as well as adolescents. They had PHP, IOP, sober living, and I had the luxury of kind of growing up in all of that. And so, at the very beginning, I saw the value of the multiple layers of recovery support. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I worked for them for about 11 years, and
well, now let's back up for a minute. So you
Sure.
got sober one time. You got sober one time. It worked for you the first time, and as you said, there are multiple relapses and multiple stints in treatment and multiple attempts at getting sober for the majority of people. And I got sober one time I got sober and I've stayed sober ever since. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. You did as well. What do you think? Why do you think you were able to stay sober that very first time?
I had a lot of support, not just from my family, who did their very best with limited direction, to just support me and to let me know that I was loved regardless of what I was walking through. The other part was, it's funny, my aftercare process was I lived at an Alano club. I mean, I unfortunately I didn't take advantage of, and there wasn't really very many options available back in those days to step down into PHP, to step down into IOP, and sober livings were few and far between. So there really wasn't any sober livings or extended cares even. So what I did was I I had a sponsor right away. I went to meetings every single day, multiple meetings every single day, and that's why I say I don't know how many people are familiar with with the term Alano Club, but I lived at the Alano Club from the if I was off work, I was there all day. I went to an early meeting. I drank coffee and played hearts or spades until the next meeting, and interacted with other sober and clean men and women who were doing the same thing I was, just trying to put one foot in front of the other, stay clean and sober one day at a time. And it worked for me. And like I said, and then I about 6 years into my own personal recovery, I stepped into working in the treatment industry, which is a story all in and of itself. So,
okay. So first, I just want to point out, so you spent a bunch of time at the Alano Club. You were either at work, or you were going to meetings, or you were hanging out with people in recovery. Like, you fully immersed
myself,
immersed yourself into recovery, which that's what I did. That's the same thing I did. It's my whole entire life. My first 2 years was recovery. I went to meetings, I went to work, I hung out with people, I hung out with my sponsor, I did step work. I went to the meeting after the meeting, I was at the meeting before the meeting. I was like, that was what I did, was I hung out with people. That was the environment I put myself in. And so many times we hear people that want to get clean and sober, they want a different life, but then they still want to hang out with their own friends and with their old friends that they drank and did drugs with. And it's impossible to do.
Well, it certainly makes it much more difficult than it needs to be,
right.
I've been witness to that many times, as I know you have, with the work you do with the people in new recovery that you work with.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So now, sorry, I cut you off. You were going to talk, you were going to tell me about how you ended up working in the field.
Well, back in the day, you didn't get rich working in the treatment industry. And, if you're doing it right today, you probably make a pretty good living, but you don't get rich.
Right.
So I had a good job. I grew up in construction. My dad was a big wig in a big Southern California construction company. He got me into it because I was earlier on, I was a young guy, newly married with a baby on the way. So he helped me to get into a good paying job that had good benefits. And so I did that for about 16 years prior to getting sober and making the transition, like I said, about 6 years into my own personal recovery, into the treatment industry. I hated working in construction, and I whined about it for the first 5 years of my sobriety to my sponsor, who recommended on several occasions that I try working with others, that I try, possibly working at a treatment center or doing something to give back or pay it forward. And I just, by then I had two babies, and I made really good money. By that time I was a licensed general contractor. But again, I hated what I did. I mean, I was not fulfilled on any level. So anyway, I had saved up enough money. My sponsor for the last time said, look, I'm not going to say it again, but I would recommend that you try, paying it forward and working with others in the treatment industry. And I said, well, okay, I'll give it 6 months. I have enough money in the bank. I can give it 6 months, see how it works. I stepped into, my first job was a crisis hotline in an intake department for a large, back in that day, it was a larger, well-known treatment center in Southern California, in Ventura County. And I kid you not, I did that job for about 2 weeks, and I immediately knew that I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And from that day forward, because I had some time underneath my belt, they gave me the opportunity and utilized me in all facets of their programming. So I had the luxury or the gift of being trained in multiple levels of treatment. So it was a unique experience back in that day. And I left there when they closed down and worked another job, and then I ended up in Arizona for a startup as their director of marketing and business development. Now that lasted about a year, and they went another direction and didn't stay open. As we both know, it's hard for a good program, even in this day and age, to be successful in this unless they do certain things the right way. So anyway, I was already doing consulting, so I just started doing consulting, and I've been doing consulting pretty much since then. Right. And then a couple of years ago, my current partner and I started a case management group that we'll talk a little bit more about later.
All right. So what led you to case management? And that's one of the things I know you're passionate about, case management. Yeah. Tell me more about case management. I think there's a lot of people out there. You have inpatient treatment, you've got intervention, you've got inpatient treatment, you've got outpatient treatment, you've got PHP, you've got recovery coaching,
detox, recovery coaching. Yeah,
got all those things. So where does case management fit into the continuum?
Well, I think that is, I think, and again, I have scratched my head for years trying to figure out, what the golden ticket was to success. I knew that I continued to live one day at a time, clean and sober, by being responsible for my behavior and my choices. I knew that if I could do it, if Tim Westbrook can do it, there are others out there that can do that if there is a structure in place that that I think was missing. I kept looking at what was wrong, what was going on, what were we missing, and the missing was right in front of us, and it still is. I mean, it's no matter how comprehensive the treatment, the primary stabilization process is, and that's regardless of whether it's an intervention to a detox, to an RTC, to a PHP, to an IOP, to long-term extended care, or something, in between. The reality is when they complete that and they start to transition back, because we've worked with people who are chronic relapsers, regardless of whether they went to just detox and tried doing meetings on their own, or whether they went to detox and RTC and extended care or whatever. It didn't make any difference. The thing is once they left, so whether they were there for 5 to 10 days, or whether they were in a recovery environment, a treatment process for 28, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, a year, it really didn't make any difference. It was when they got to the other end of that and they were giving, and it's interesting, regardless of how comprehensive the aftercare plan was from the last treatment environment that they came from, what we found was that without some type of structured oversight, there was there was a lapse. They would, they get out feeling wonderful. They would go to their meetings religiously for the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. They would go to their IOP. They would complete their IOP. By the end of the IOP, they were thinking, well, the last few IOPs have been really kind of boring. They're repeating themselves now, and I've got it going on, so I'm ready to graduate from IOP. So they go to, continue to go to meetings, but very quickly, all of a sudden, they feel so good that something comes up in their life, and they say, I can miss that meeting today, or you know what, I don't need to see my therapist this week. I've had a good, couple weeks leading up to this. I'm gonna postpone that and reschedule it, out. And I'm gonna stop taking my medication. I feel great. I don't need my antidepressant medication anymore. And so we watched that, and we realized that there needed to be some type of ongoing checks and balances, ongoing, for lack of a better term, navigator, to help them stay honest with themselves and the recovery that they have accumulated to this point. So we started recognizing the value of ongoing case management, and that ongoing case management can consist of multiple things. It can consist of weekly coaching, daily check-ins, multiple check-ins within a week, every week. Let's see what else. Making sure that they're staying tied into not just their meetings, but their therapy, their counseling, the doctor's appointments. And I'm not just talking about the psychiatrist. I'm talking about, making sure that they're handling their personal medical issues as well. So if there's something going on, they're not just going, throw it to the side and forget about it until that becomes a catalyst for self-medicating behavior. And that's usually where it starts. It's like, I'm doing good. I can have a drink with my buddies now. And I think you said it a little earlier, in the podcast. It's like we end up thinking that, if we're not doing our due diligence, and we're not staying focused on staying clean and sober one day at a time, and living a life of recovery one day at a time, we get lost in our own delusions of how good we think we're doing. And we miss the time that we used to spend with our friends. Now we don't want to drink or use like we did back then, but why can't we go to that spring training party that we usually go to every year that I missed last year? I'm going to go this year. Yeah. And the reality is they talk themselves into, I'll just have one drink, and they may do that. They may have one drink that day. And we find out very quickly that if there is not something in place to redirect that moment of excuse making that led to a bottle of beer, I know it doesn't sound like much, but for someone like you and me, Tim, that starts us on a path that takes us off of the recovery direction that we've worked so diligently at being successful with. And that's, again, where I think case management at least came up from my perspective as being so necessary in the ongoing success of somebody in their long-term recovery. And I'm not saying that, that we work with somebody for the next 20 years. I'm saying that, for as long as we can, we keep them in a structured, supported recovery environment with structured guidance that will give them the best chance of success that they've ever had before.
Right.
And that's what we're looking for. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so Dr. Michael ''𝐶𝐬, I spoke with him a few weeks ago. I
love Michael. Yeah.
And Mike, and he's, as you know, he's the he oversees the program that monitors doctors, dentists, and airline pilots. Doctors, dentists, and airline pilots are monitored for 5 years.
That's right.
5 years. Do you know what the success rate is of that population?
I don't know the number, no, but I'm sure it's high.
It's 86%.
Exactly.
It's 86%.
Michael and I have sat down over many breakfasts, having conversations about just that, the long-term viability of a supported recovery process. And, you know, they do it already. So why can't everybody do something like that? You know?
Right. And the problem, and I think you said it in talking about the journey to recovery. It's like somebody goes to treatment, they're in a bubble. They go to IOP, they're still in a bubble. You know, it's like they step down, they're still kind of in a bubble. There's still accountability, support. They still have, you know, they still have things in place. And then they start, you know, their mind starts to think that they got this. And meanwhile, they drank and used and did drugs for 5 or 10 or 25 years. And they think that in 30 days, in 45 days, in 60 days, 90 days, that's going to be all undone. And it's like, it just takes more, it takes more time. And so for the person that really wants to get clean and sober, it's like everything you can do to give yourself a fighting chance. And it's like, get yourself a case manager, get yourself a recovery coach. What is the difference? Because I hear this a lot of times, and I'm sure you hear this as well. Like, well, I have a therapist and I have a sponsor and I'm going to meetings. Why do I need a case manager? What's the difference between
I can tell you what it is for us, you know, in how we, you know, and how we work with our clientele and their families. And we'll talk more about the families too, because, you know, we talked about it earlier, but the family is a key component of this process as well. But, you know, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
What's the difference between a case manager, a therapist, and a sponsor?
Well, the case manager is the person that helps an individual stay dialed into those resources. Okay, I never, with any of our clients, do we ever talk about, you know, well, we're the same as, you know, we are not. We make it perfectly clear. We are not your sponsor. You know, this is us, you know, basically being oversight for the things that you need to be doing, should be doing, and making sure that you are doing them. You know, so if you haven't gotten a sponsor yet, we're the person that's saying, have you gotten your sponsor yet? Have you gone to a meeting? Have you created a short list of candidates? You know, have you talked to them? You know, what are you doing? You know, we make sure that you know, that they're doing those things. Same thing with the therapist, you know, and we help them to identify. Again, I've been working in this industry for 30 plus years, in my own personal recovery for 36 and a half years. I am, you know, there to also help them navigate the provider resource pool as well. You know, you and I know this. We've talked a lot about this back and forth. You know, the longer we're in this field, the more people we know. And I had the luxury of growing up on the East Coast, expanding out nationally on the West Coast, expanding out nationally to the East Coast. So I have a lot of contacts from West Coast to East Coast. My partner grew up on the East Coast and has a lot of contacts from the East Coast to the West Coast. So between the two of us, if we don't have a resource in Timbuktu, we know who to call to find out, you know, who is available as a therapist, as a nutritionist, as a psychiatrist, as a trauma therapist. You know, what are the specialties? So, you know, it's really important that, you know, that they recognize that our role is to help them navigate the recovery path, the recovery journey that they're on, and to identify and access the appropriate resources. We are not all of the resources. for an individual and or their family. We are the oversight committee that helps them to not only identify appropriate resources that have been vetted, that are good, that we know, can do the work that they say they do. And then we oversee that, making sure that they're going to their appointments, that they're seeing their doctor, that they're following the plan, that they're taking their medication. And if they're not, then, we have a conversation about what needs to happen with that. Do they need to make some adjustments with their psychiatrist? Do they need to talk to their trauma therapist about something that's coming up? We guide them back to the appropriate provider that they need to continue working with.
I think what I'm hearing you say is it's more than just recovery. It's more, you're not helping a person dig into their trauma. You're not helping a person work through their issues. What you're doing is you're a guide. It's like a life coach. You're a guide to life, and it's everything from recovery, meetings, sponsorship, working the steps. Do you have a job? Are you exercising? Are you, what does your diet look like? Let's find you a nutritionist. It's all of those, it's all of those things, because as you and I both know, recovery is way more than just not drinking and doing drugs.
It's
way more. It's healthy lifestyle habits that are conducive to recovery. It's the mind, body, spirit. It's everything.
Absolutely. And what I've learned in my own recovery journey is that in that first 5 years, first 5 years were key. I was told by, my sponsor and everybody that had more time than I had, that the first 5 years were key. If you could walk through the challenges that you're going to face in your first 5 years, everything after that can be more acceptable, more tolerable, more functional. Again, it's all about the decisions and choices we make. But the first 5 years are the hardest. We have the highs, we have the lows, we have the pink clouds, we have the dark depressions, we have changes in our lives. From breakups to girlfriends and boyfriends, to divorces, to losing children, to, in my case, I became a single parent overnight with 2 children. So it's like you go through these changes that if you don't have a strong support system in that first 5 years, your challenges are going to take the lead on your choices. And we don't want that. We want your recovery to lead you in the positive choices that you're going to make.
So let's talk about the family. Let's talk about the family and case management. What's the value and importance of case management and supporting the family members?
Well, I think that, obviously, if you've worked 5 minutes in the recovery industry, and you've worked with an individual who is gone into a treatment environment and then returned home to a family who didn't do any of the work they did after their identified loved one, did even 30 days of stabilization and trying to change a dysfunctional rhythm that they had become accustomed to, and the family didn't do a thing. It's a recipe for disaster, because they're going to go home, like I was saying, the first 5 years are challenging under the best of circumstances. So if you're going home and the family has not done any of their work, then there's going to be immediate conflict of perspective. And so what we find very important is of course it is contingent on when we come into the family as a case management group and start doing the work. So if the identified loved one is in treatment, they're safe, they're sound, they're doing the work they need to do. We'll do the the communication with the treatment environment to make sure how they're progressing. But our attention turns almost solely to the family and the work that they need to do. What are you doing? I mean, everything from, and we assess them as much as we assess the identified loved one on the front end of our taking on a contract. In the family, we make sure that at the very least they're going to Al-Anon, CODA, Nar-Anon, some of the, and we're making sure that they understand the value of them going to see a therapist individually. So a mom and dad, for example, we'll make sure that they're both individually going to a therapist, and if appropriate, coming back together for a couples therapist. We want them to do the work that they need to do to prepare for their identified loved one reintegrating back into their lives, whether that's back home again or whether that's just back into their lives. They may live down the road or an apartment, but they're connected as family. So if they're not, if one portion of that family isn't doing the work that they need to do, there's going to be a hiccup in the reintegration process. And we want there to be as smooth of a reentry for the identified loved one and the family, for that matter, when they all come back together again. So we feel it's really important, as important to do the work with the family as it is with their identified loved one.
Well, and the reality is that the family is part of the problem. I mean, they just are. And a lot of times you've seen this, I've seen this, the family, the parents, the brothers, they don't, their reaction a lot of times is, well, I'm not the one with the problem. And it's like,
Sure.
Well, they were part of the problem because they lived with that person. They were a big part of that person's life for their entire life, usually. And so they are part of the problem. And so, and even if they're not part of the problem, they need to, what's the only way to find out if you are part of the problem?
Well, and they've all been affected by the problem. So they've all been affected by the behavior, whether it's their behavior, whether it's their identified loved one's behavior. They are all affected by the behavior, and we need to address that. And we need to get everybody the help and support that they need to be successful long term. And that's really the bottom line.
It's that integration process, and what does the relationship need to look like moving forward? Because the relationship should be different than it was, even though they weren't the ones that did drugs. The relationship still needs to change. So what does the relationship look like moving forward?
Well, and they don't realize how involved they were in the dysfunction. Even if it was how they reacted to it, whether they reacted in a codependent way or they reacted out of anger and, an intolerance, there is there's a response that needs to be dealt with, so that they can respond more appropriately, more therapeutically, for lack of a better term, than they were before, living in the midst of the dysfunction. And you can point your fingers all you want to, but you lived in there for years, along with this other person that you say is the problem or was the problem. You stayed there forever, in a lifetime perspectively.
Yep.
So,
yep.
And I also want to say too, that a lot of the times, at least, we do a lot of work with primary mental health as well, which has become very unique in the case management process that we do. We have come to understand, and I know this for myself, because like I said, my first 5 years, once I got past my first 5 years, I started doing even more work on myself. And I know you do too, Tim. You go to retreats, you work out, you do things that are spiritual, that ground you, that center you, that you keep you focused as you progress forward. I did the same thing. I didn't realize how much underlying issues I had that basically, and I am not denying the fact that I am an alcoholic and a drug addict. I am, without hesitation. I am one drink away from a drunk. I'm one drug away from a high, and I know that regardless how much time I have. But the reality is I understood very quickly that, that my addict and alcoholic behavior was self-medicating. I was avoiding, feelings, emotions, issues that I did not want to address. So I would drink and use to avoid addressing them. And we find the same thing. Self-medicating behavior has become more of a catchphrase in our industry, certainly, but certainly for us too, in the sense that, we want you to be successful. And how do we do that if we don't help you to address the underlying issues? If you don't continue to do the work with that trauma therapist, if you don't continue to, and a lot of people that we work with are avoidant of medication, and I get it. I understand. I just stopped doing medication or drugs, so why would I want to get on medication? But the reality is sometimes our bodies are so out of whack, that we need to, even if it's just short term, we need to do something to reestablish, a chemical balance within our system, so we can take over and make better choices and get off the medication at some point, hopefully. But the reality is use it as the recovery tool that it's meant to be, and we help our clients and our families understand the value of appropriate diagnosing and medication and the management of that medication, short term or even longer term. We have some, like I said, we have some primary mental health clients as well. They have found health through the right regimen of medications and long-term recovery. So.
Right. And you said it earlier. It's like a person gets to a place where they feel good and they're like, you know what? I'm feeling great. Let me take the reins back.
Yeah.
Let me be in control. And it's like, no, you got to listen to the doctor. You've got to listen to some other people that are clean and sober, and they've been clean and sober for a long time. You've got to listen to some people that have been on this journey and are still on this journey, and take some suggestions, and let's just slow it down one day at a time, as they say.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
So now let's talk. I want to switch gears or not switch gears, but I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
How is that affecting people that need to be in recovery, people that want recovery, people that are in recovery that are falling off the boat? What's happening in the recovery space as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because, we've all been watching. Certainly my partner and I have watched since the onset of COVID, and on multiple levels, watched how it affected not only the providers and how they worked with their clientele or didn't work with their clientele. Some of them chose, this whole telehealth thing is over my head. I don't want to do it. I'll wait. This is in the beginning, of course. Right. And then there were others who jumped right into, and it was fun to watch, how people were expanding their perspective to include telehealth as a viable resource to continue working with their clients. My partner and I, we work globally, so telehealth has always been a part of our case management and our coaching. So it wasn't a big transition for us, but that being said, it was for others. And I got to tell you, our industry is very resilient. I have watched how well our colleagues and in all levels of care, not just therapists in an office doing telehealth, but how treatment centers have adapted, how they have adapted their internal resources to a policy that maintains a level of safety that people can feel comfortable going to, but also the other products that they may offer via telehealth. As, some of the family work now is being done through telehealth. They're not asking the family to come into the treatment center and do a week intensive, but they're doing it via telehealth. I'm just saying that I am always impressed with our community, our treatment community, our recovery community, how well we adapt. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing a lot of outside of the box thinking. Again, in our industry, aside from our own safety, is the safety of our clients. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing is in the best interest of our clients and their well-being, whether it be physical or mental or behavioral. We want to make sure that everybody is safe in the room. And, now the other side of that is watching how things took a dip on the front end of the COVID, when families all of a sudden, we're all in quarantine. Everybody's using, a good addict or a good alcoholic is going to use that as an excuse. Well, I can't go get help now because of this whole COVID thing.
I can't go to a meeting.
I might get sick and die. Well, the way you were behaving before and probably continuing to behave through this COVID crisis is not doing your physical health any good either. So, so it's funny watching how, in the beginning, they used it as an excuse, but very quickly, families and individuals found that they were feeling comfortable and confident of the procedures and the policies that treatment providers were putting in place, and the different options of, okay, I'll try this telehealth thing, and a lot of people struggled with that as well because it's new, But now I'm watching, people are really stepping into the treatment centers. Their census is rising, which is a good sign, regardless of where we're at with quarantine. People are saying, okay, I feel comfortable enough and I'm sick enough that I need to get help. And they're doing it. So regardless of the excuses on the front end, those excuses aren't flying not only for the individual, but they're certainly not flying with the family or the employer or anything like that either. So,
right. It's like with the social distancing and the quarantining, all of that promotes isolation, which is the opposite of human connection. Human connection is what we need. Human connection is the opposite of addiction. So it's like with it. So what's going to be worse or what's going to be better? Is it better? Is it going to be better to be isolated, or is it better to seek the help that you need and put yourself at risk? Or is there a balance in between? And I think that's, with the telehealth and the other options that have been made available.
Well, and like we tell our clientele and their families, this is what we're here for, and we're doing a lot. We haven't slowed down. Telehealth our phones started ringing even more. The volume increased because of the fact of who we are and what we represent as far as a support mechanism, especially through a crisis like COVID. Where people are going, okay, I don't feel like I can do what I might have done, 6 months ago. So what do I do now? So, well, we help them navigate that. We haven't stopped sending people into treatment because of COVID-19. It just means that we need to be a little bit more cognizant and responsible of the environment that we're sending them to. Are they taking all the right precautions? And like I said before, everyone that we work with has some type of a protocol, a viable protocol to address COVID-19 in place at their treatment facilities and for their environment. But the other side of that is if a person, and there's another thing too, a lot of folks have been through treatment 3, 4, 5, 10 times. They don't necessarily need to go to, a 30-day treatment environment or a 45-day or a 60-day residential environment. They need to be stabilized, sure. So they may need detox, but then let's put that plan into place that you chose to ignore, the last 6 times they recommended a comprehensive aftercare plan for you. Let's put that in place and we'll help you guide that path. And so that's been working really well via the quarantine through telehealth and certainly telephonically. So again, moving forward, I see this whole COVID thing as we've got our arms wrapped around it, and the clients and their families are becoming more comfortable with, I hate to say it, the new norm. But when things open back up again, it's not going to be a drastic transition. They're getting used to the way life is now, and we're helping them to adapt through case management to access the provider services and resources that they would have accessed before. We're just helping them to feel better about doing it. That's all.
Right. So during, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, why do you think a service like case management or recovery coaching is more necessary than ever?
Well, because of the isolation. I think that, people are, you said it a minute ago, and people are isolating in this quarantine. Even this, we have all done a lot of Zoom calls and telehealth calls, and we're seeing this one-dimensional picture of another person on the other side of the lens. And although that is better than what it might have been 10 years ago, certainly what it was 20 years ago, we barely had a phone with an answering machine 20 years ago. So, life is getting more technologically functional for us to do our job. And it is imperative now because of the required quarantines and people isolate. I mean, you know this, Tim. I mean, we as an alcoholic, we as an addict, we as a person struggling with depression and mental health issues, our go-to is isolation. So now we're being forced to isolate even longer than we might have under normal circumstances, because it is the norm for us to stay indoors. And it makes it an easier excuse to sit there and you and I both know this, spending too much time with ourselves in our sickness is not a good place to live. It takes its toll very quickly under the best of circumstances. So COVID has it's kind of accelerated that, that angst, that depression, that hole that we dig for ourselves, that darkness that we surround ourselves in. And case management has been that hand, that lifeline, that support mechanism that helps them to see through the darkness, up out of the hole, and realize that there are some other options that maybe they weren't even considering because they were stuck in isolation and living in their darkness. So we help them to navigate out of the hole, out of the house if appropriate, going to a treatment center if needed, or a detox if required. But at the very least, interacting like this, via telehealth, whether it's with a therapist, whether it's IOP through telehealth, PHP through telehealth, whether it's doing family work via telehealth. There are a lot of options available that we didn't think about via telehealth today. Everything we thought needed to be face-to-face, and we know that that's not necessarily true. We can adapt.
Well, and I think the bottom line is what I'm hearing you say. It's Tim needs to listen to somebody else besides Tim. Rick needs to listen to somebody else besides Rick. And whether it's in person, on the phone, via telehealth, via Zoom, we need human connection. That goes back to human connection, right? We need human connection. We need somebody else telling us what to do, giving us some feedback and some guidance and some direction.
We need direction. We need navigation. We need checks and balances. We need somebody to listen to, our delusions and be able to tell us that's delusional.
That's worst idea.
That's really the black and white of it. It's being able to reach out and talk to somebody even like this, and have them look back in the lens and say, what if you tried it this way instead, Rick? Or what if you looked at it differently? What if you tried doing this instead of that? Just to get a different perspective, lends lends a truth to the direction that we're trying to move in. So again, checks and balances.
So let's we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to so if somebody is interested in case management or recovery coaching, like how can they find you? Like how can they find you? What's their first step?
Their first step is to just reach out and call me. Our website is knrbandassociates.com. My direct number is 602-451-0123. And the beauty about what we do is it costs nothing to have a conversation. We're here to, that's another thing. You were asking how my partner and I got into doing case management work was basically knowing that we had a direction to offer, and knowing that along with everybody else struggling, there is a navigational guidance that's available to them. So it's easy to, and we're not the only resource out there. Like I said, we've been helping people at no cost forever. And we decided to formalize it and create a case management group so that we could become, what's the term I'm looking for? More legitimate in what it is that we were trying to do with our work with the identified loved one and their family. But like I said, the initial conversation doesn't cost a thing. And if someone's not the right fit for us, or we're not the right fit for them, we make sure that they don't leave that conversation without a handful of resources to reach out to. Right. Because that's what we do. We are here to help them. If we're not the right resource to help them ongoing, we're going to give them some options to explore to find success in their recovery journey. Again, both the identified loved one and their family. So,
right. Who should call you? Like who would you consider, like who is your client? If someone is a family member, they're struggling, they know they have a problem, they think they have a problem, they might have a problem, they live in Arizona, they live in California, they live in New York, who should call you?
You know what? Anybody who is either struggling with their own next steps in their recovery journey, and or a family member who's concerned about their loved one, and and looking for direction. Again, we get calls. I mean, we have people reach out to us from every place. I mean, we're very global. We get referrals from therapists, from treatment centers, from Psychology Today. I mean, from our website, we get referrals and calls from all over, so globally. But anybody who is struggling with trying to navigate their recovery journey or trying to help their loved one navigate a recovery journey is a good conversation for us.
Right. Awesome.
Okay. And anybody struggling with mental health issues, whether tied to addiction or whether primary, we've done a lot of work with just primary mental health clients as well, and their families, helping them to navigate the system.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have today. Rick, thanks so much. I really enjoyed spending time with you today. Everybody, thanks for listening. Give us a like, give us a love, give us a comment. Share this interview with somebody that you think might get value from it. And that's all we got. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tim.